After 4 days of hostilities that alarmed the world, India and Pakistan have agreed to a ceasefire, stopping all military action as of 5 p.m. India confirmed the ceasefire shortly after US President Donald Trump announced it on his Truce social platform. India said that it was the Pakistan DGMO who initiated the call this afternoon, and after which discussions took place and an understanding was reached. Minutes after India announced a full and immediate ceasefire with Pakistan after days of missile, drone and artillery attacks, we heard Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar issue a stern message for harbors of terror. He said, and I quote him, "India has consistently maintained a firm and uncompromising stance against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. It will continue to do so." The ceasefire comes a day after Pakistan targeted Indian air bases. India chose its targets carefully. Those are the visuals coming in of Prime Minister Modi in that meeting with Raksha Mantri, National Security Advisor, other officers of the Indian Armed Forces. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is present as well. Foreign Secretary is present as well. This is the first meeting which is being chaired by the Prime Minister after the ceasefire announcement which has come in. Remember, India this morning launched a series of attacks against Pakistan air bases, and the objective was to cripple Pakistan's capability to launch aerial attacks using drones and fighter jets. And the attacks on these key Air Force bases had actually had the capacity certainly of crippling Pakistan's aerial mobility. And shortly after the breakthrough, India had warned that any act of terror will be considered an act of war. We will be staying on those visuals because Prime Minister Modi's meeting with the Defence Minister, with External Affairs Minister and others becomes very, very crucial at this juncture. What is the big message that will be carrying forward from this will become important again. Let's listen in now to the Foreign Secretary and the MOD briefing which happened earlier today.
Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan called the Director General of Military Operations of India at 15:35 hours earlier this afternoon. It was agreed between them that both sides would stop all firing and military action on land and in the air and sea with effect from 1700 hours Indian Standard Time today. Instructions have been given on both sides to give effect to this understanding. The Directors General of Military Operations will talk again on the 12th of May at 1200 hours. Thank you.
Several attempts were made by Pakistan on spreading a misinformation campaign, as we have seen for the last few days. There were attempts made to say that our S-400 at a northern base was destroyed, which was completely false, and that it was destroyed by a JF-17, it was a false information. Also that the BrahMos installation was attacked and it was destroyed was false. The destruction of airfields at Srinagar, Jammu, Pathankot, Bhuj, Nalia, etc. was also a false claim. The forward ammunition dump at Chandigarh and Beas are also fit and fine, and we showed you these in the photographs in the morning briefing today. Also, there was a certain different way of miscampaign that Pakistan conducted by its press conferences, which was conducted in a manner which was completely misleading and devoid of facts. Pakistan has been spreading fabricated allegations that the Indian Armed Forces have targeted mosques. Let us make this very clear here, that India is a secular nation and the Indian Armed Forces are a reflection of our constitutional values. We hold every place of worship of all faiths in the highest regard. Our operations have been aimed exclusively at terrorist camps and facilities being used for anti-India activities. No religious sites, I repeat, no religious sites have been targeted by the Indian Armed Forces. Over the past few days, as we have seen, Pakistan all has suffered very heavy and unsustainable losses after it has given us an unprovoked attack on our installations. It has suffered losses in both land and air. There has been an extensive damage to the crucial Pakistani air bases like Skardu, Sargodha, Jacobabad, and Bholari. In addition, a loss of AD weapon system and radars made the defense of Pakistani airspace untenable. Across the line of control, extensive and precise damage to military infrastructure and command control centers and logistic installations. In addition to that, 2 military personnel had led to complete breakdown of its defensive and offensive capability and also Pakistani morale.
And joining me now is Shivarur straight from Srinagar. We also have Aishwarya Jain tracking Prime Minister's meeting very closely. Shiv, I'm coming to you first, because government sources are saying clearly that this is a conditional ceasefire only on kinetic action, and Pakistan still has water, trade, diplomatic and financial sanctions. So clearly, as far as the messaging which is going from the government of India is that if there is any kind of violation now onwards, it will be seen as an act of war.
Absolutely correct, Maria. I think India is signaling very unconditionally that this ceasefire has been on its terms. It's because Pakistan requested the ceasefire. The Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan, a full 9 hours after some of the highest kinetic actions that India has taken against Pakistani military bases, 11 of them in all across the country, is when the DGMO of Pakistan decided to pick up the phone, dial India and ask for that ceasefire. A cumulative effect of kinetic actions plus all of those diplomatic measures that you mentioned, as well as the Indus Water Treaty, had clearly worn Pakistan down. Now, this may not be a time, for any kind of national gloating, as it were, but never should we ever lose sight of the fact that all of this began with a terrorist attack in which 26 innocents were butchered by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists. And keeping that in view, the fact that India has, wrangled a ceasefire after Pakistan came to it, obviously under great pressure of these military strikes on its most strategic assets in different parts of the country, has meant that India has agreed to a ceasefire from a position of strength. Very importantly, that you pointed out that the Indus Water Treaty, perhaps the most unsung of Indian actions against Pakistan, has had a very, very deep effect on the Pakistani psyche, politically, diplomatically, and even culturally, given that, it had never been imagined that water would be cut off. But I think the prospect of, a terrible energy crisis, a food crisis, a farming crisis in that country meant that Pakistan was already on the back foot before these kinetic actions actually began. And the drone strikes were actually something they needed to sell to their domestic audience in order to look strong. So net, I believe that India has, negotiated this ceasefire from a position of power, from a position of advantage, and has very tellingly pointed out that only kinetic and military actions are stopping right now. All of the other decisions continue to remain active.
All right, let me bring in Aishwarya. Aishwarya, the message that has come in from Prime Minister Modi's new doctrine, it is India's modern security doctrine, which has been firmly put on for the world to see, that it is swift, surgical and unapologetically assertive. India can protect its citizens, and if there is an act of terrorism which emanates from its neighborhood, then they should be prepared for retaliation of this nature.
Well, India remains watchful. While the ceasefire offers temporary relief from rising tensions, the Indian military's statement underscores that peace will be maintained only if Pakistan refrains from provocation, and India will remain watchful, asserting that future threats will be met with forceful and immediate retaliation. Remember what Colonel Qureshi also stated during that press conference that India will not tolerate misinformation, false propaganda, or any aggression. Forces will remain strong, alert, and fully prepared. And therefore, the reason perhaps those visuals on our screens where Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairing that high-level meeting, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, NSA Ajit Doval, along with all the service chiefs being given a strong message from the Prime Minister that our forces should remain on strong alert and they should be fully prepared because there has been, of course, a mistrust with Pakistan. We all know that what is the history with the Pakistan, and therefore the reason perhaps on one side there is temporary relief, ceasefire, but Indian armed forces and Indian dispensation will be always on alert, and there will be no, such case that will be dealt. Of course, the message was loud and clear in the earlier meeting as well that if any sort of future terrorism activity will be done from the Pakistani side, from their terror hubs, then it will be considered as an act of war, and India will respond accordingly.
Aishwarya and Shiv, thank you so much for joining us. Let's bring in the guests who are joining us at this hour. We have Rajiv Dogra, former diplomat, Lieutenant General Rajendra Singh is a former DG Infantry, Swasti Rao is geopolitical and foreign policy expert. We have Elizabeth Threlkeld joining us from Washington, D.C. She is a senior fellow and director of the South Asia program at the Simpson Center. I'm going to begin with you, Elizabeth. What, according to you, has happened today in terms of the ceasefire? Donald Trump has taken to, Truth Social to claim credit for what was the role of U.S. administration, but India is clear that it was on the request of the Pakistanis, the DGMO of Pakistan, that a call was initiated, and then things move ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I think the big picture here is I don't want to get too caught up in who necessarily was behind this, who said what to who, what the timing was. I think the important thing to remember is that a ceasefire looked somewhat unlikely just 12 hours ago, 24 hours ago, right? This has been the most significant escalation that we've seen between the two sides in several decades. So, I have to go on the same set of facts or same set of statements that you do. My understanding is that the U.S. was involved, and I think we've seen statements coming out from the president, from the Secretary of State over the last several days that back that up. But regardless, bottom line is this is a positive development, and hopefully we can kind of catch our collective breath and really start to ask important questions about what happens next so that we don't find ourselves in a similar situation going forward.
A word now on the role of U.S. We were expecting, some movement, particularly after Saudi Arabia. Saudi minister was in Islamabad. The movement which happened with regards to the foreign minister of Iran as well. But it certainly seems that U.S., which has that lever over Pakistan, used it rather effectively.
So, this is, I think, something that we will continue to learn a little bit more about in the coming days. It has just been a couple hours since this was announced. But I think here it's also important to recognize that it takes two to tango. And so looking for more information on what those conversations looked like between the U.S. and India as well, I think is a key part of this puzzle, right? Because outside of this immediate crisis context, there is a hugely important U.S.-India defense partnership. We work with India closely on a broad range of issues. And so I think going forward, one question that I'll be looking to ask and analyze is what, if any, impact this crisis has on that broader set of issues, or if the two countries are able to move on and move forward, for example, with the trade deal and the other elements of the partnership, which I think would be a positive for both sides.
All right. Ambassador Dogra, your thoughts on the ceasefire?
Well, firstly, it's not ceasefire. It's just holding the guns, so to speak, okay. That both sides have agreed that they will observe the stoppage of arms activities till further notice. And further notice is the next telephonic talk between the two DGMOs on 12th, 2 days from now. But more than that, I mean, one is the good intentions, whether they'll continue over the next 2 days and what thereafter. Because DGMOs have a limited role, which is technical in nature, that the two countries have agreed not to fire at each other, and let's do all we can to maintain that status. So 12th is that line where they will sort of assess whether it has been carried out in letter and spirit. But the bigger task is what happens thereafter. Would there be a sort of meetings between the two countries to work towards a ceasefire that is longer lasting? Would there be a meeting that also ensures that India's concerns over terrorism, after all, terrorism has not been wiped out of Pakistan. There are 80 to 90 terrorists who are still operating in Jammu and Kashmir as per our assessment. And the Pakistani authorities have repeatedly said that we will use terror. That is before today. So the threat exists. And what happens if there's another big terror attack on India? Do we go back to the square one? So there are many imponderables, and the biggest question mark is Pakistan's record in history. Starting from 1947-48, Pakistan has not kept up any agreement which favors India, whereas India has a record of honoring agreements, most principally Indus Waters Agreement, where it has starved Indians of water but ensured that Pakistan luxuriates in plenty of water. So I think we also have to look at the record of what happened, for example, after 47-48, what happened in 1965 when we gave up Haji Pir Pass, which is now the route for most terrorists to come in, or what happened during Simla Agreement in 1972, where Bhutto, the moment he crossed the border, he said, "I've made a fool of that woman," meaning Indira Gandhi, that he had no intention of honoring any of the agreement. And the worst of it was, the most inhuman part of it was, we sent back 93,000 prisoners of war, one of the biggest sort of captures of so many POWs in history. But Bhutto ensured that the POWs Pakistan had captured rotted in jail, so much so that when he was in prison, he wrote, and I've quoted it in my book, he wrote that my heart cries when I hear their pain and their cries in the night. So the fact is that the same man who was in power at that before then ensured that there was deception and there was not a gentleman's honoring of the agreement he had reached in Simla. And the list goes on. I can quote chapter and verse on this. So I think we have to be cautious, we have to be careful, and the threat of terrorism will not easily go away unless ISI mends its ways and ensures that all terrorists are brought to book, handed over to India, and the chapter is closed and done away with.
And Ambassador Dogra, since you say that it's only about the guns being put down for the moment, and it's not really a truce or a ceasefire per se, let me bring in General Singh on this. General Singh, top government of India sources are telling us, and this came in few hours ago, that any future act of terror will be considered an act of war against India. India so far in this entire 72 hours of turbulence that we saw, escalation coming in from Pakistan, aggression coming in from Pakistan, had maintained that it was not really technically declared a war. It was seen as warlike situation. But if there is another act of terror which happens, certainly we do not hope that it ever happens. then it will be seen as an act of war. I think that distinction that is being made here becomes important even as we talk about this operational truce which has come in.
Yes, Maria, you're right. Before I come to the aspect of what these rules of engagement the government had announced in the morning, to say that any act of terror henceforth will be considered as an act of war. I think we need to spend about 15 seconds in seeing as to what all has happened. What has happened is that Pakistan was in a bad state, economically, security-wise. Its situations in Baluch and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa front, and their army chief, who is a radical by himself, then decided to strike by using terrorists in Pahalgam. Thereafter, our government took a very firm stance, adopted a number of diplomatic and economic measures, and also suspending the Indus Water Treaty, and then went in to strike the terrorist camp with 100% accuracy. 100%. 9 terrorist camps were struck, and we were able to bring down about 90 to 100 of these terrorists. Now, in the background of this, Pakistan reacted with nearly 400 drones on the first night, and hardly any of those drones reached their target. Our air defense was superb. Our troops were alert on the ground. Our system of countering these actions by Pakistan was good. The same thing was repeated by them the next night also, and the result was same and similar. We were able to ensure that hardly any damage was caused to any of our air installations. On the Pakistan or from the Indian side, the situation was totally different. What happened was that we chose our targets correctly. We chose our targets with the suitable or with well thought out precision, and were able to strike about 9 to 11 of these air bases, air defense establishments, and radars. And we degraded them the first night, and we nearly destroyed them the second night. In such a scenario, Pakistan had no other option but to crumble. And they were in a kind of a situation that in the morning there were reports coming that the Prime Minister of Pakistan is holding a meeting of their National Atomic Command structure, and such kind of threats were being put, which clearly showed that Pakistan military was in a very bad shape. In this backdrop, the efforts of United States and efforts of Saudi Arabia, coupled with the pressure which Indian armed forces had exerted on them, I think really forced them to ring up the DGMO at 3:30 today and seek for a suspension of any military actions from 5 o'clock today. And I think the result of all this is that we have really nearly achieved whatever we were aiming to achieve. That is to send a message to Pakistan that don't try this with us. Otherwise, you will have to pay a heavy price.
Absolutely.
Pakistan seems to have learned this lesson. Whether it will actually reform tomorrow, only the time will tell.
But the message has been sent to the world and of course to Pakistan that if there is an act of terror, then it will be responded with this kind of airstrikes right inside Pakistan where the terror camps will be destroyed. Indian armed forces are fully equipped to carry it out because they believe in protecting their own citizens. Swasti Rao, when Operation Sindur, I mean, it all begins with Operation Sindur, and of course, then there was that retaliation and aggression from Pakistan, another round which played out between India and Pakistan this morning. So, what is being communicated here? Do you think India has effectively managed to send that message that India can protect its citizens, and when it comes to, seeking accountability and justice, that has happened?
Good evening, Maria. So very clearly, there's way too much conjecture in the air, and basically everybody is simply conjecturing and speculating. So we must sort of somewhere acknowledge the fact that nobody really knows either the military strategy or the factors that perhaps led to the decision that led to the two DGMOs, talking to each other. I mean, I would just be a little reserved and conservative and say that, yes, I do not know the whole situation. Nobody knows. We have had keyboard warriors, people coming and speculating things all last, 3-4 days. But frankly, we have to bear in mind that nobody really knows. We should be waiting for official sources. Now, secondly, you asked for my opinion. As far as my opinion goes, I think we have been unequivocally successful in conveying to Pakistan that this is not a country that believes in strategic restraint, especially when, a country like Pakistan that harbors terrorism into India as a matter of state policy, I mean, through its proxies, continues to raise the stakes. So what happened in Pahalgam is not okay and will not be tolerated. And that point has been made by Operation Sindur, which were unprecedented. It was after 1971, the first ever time that we struck Pakistani so deep. Okay, so that is a point, and that is going to go down in history as one of the turning points in how India's policy towards war on terror, its own war on terror, has evolved. There are no doubts about that, and I'm 100% sure about it. Now, linking it to the other thing, which is that if you link it to the other picture, the larger picture, which is that a state which has a toxic mindset like Pakistan, we have to talk about their regenerative capacity to harbor terrorism inside India. Now, you may argue that whatever has happened by way of Operation Sindur and the aftermath, and whatever led to the DGMOs exchanging a cessation of military activity, and I agree, there was a point here raised that the DGMO level is a different level. It is not even the chief of staff level. Okay, so those who don't know that it is tactical, and frankly, it should we should have waited for the political leadership to actually announce anything of substance, which might happen on 12th of May or not. We will have to see. But coming back, and let me just make this broader point about Pakistan's ability. See, one strike is not going to cure Pakistan of the mental illnesses. We have to raise the stakes. Of course, we have to tell them that you don't dare do something like a Pahalgam again on us. But does that mean that we are also going to deter Pakistan from all the cross-border violations, targeting our paramilitary, military armed forces? Pahalgam happened in April 2025, but since 2023, we've been losing men. Okay, so we have to sort of look at the broader security strategy and how we want to, do that. And to that, my simple point is, I think a much more constructive discussion that the strategic community can have now is that what are the key takeaways? Yes, we have to speed up our acquisitions. Yes, we have to. It has somewhere shown that indigenous platforms like Akash, they have worked wonderfully well. We have to, speed up our ATAG, productions. There are so many cases where we have excellent weapons that external countries are buying, but we are not placing enough orders. I think we have to look there. We have to double down, triple down. I don't know how to sort of pontificate on that, but we just have to get the drone acquisition in order. That is the future that has been shown. We have also seen that Pakistan seems to have some kind of an ironclad support from China and Turkey. And that is something that India should worry about, because I think what not a lot of people are talking about here is that by whatever happened in the last 4 days to be precise, please understand that from the Chinese perspective, this was the first time that the Chinese weapons were being battle tested. So this is also a kind of a takeaway for the Chinese that they will be using for improving upon.
Ms. Rao, also Turkish drones, all those drones which were sent towards India yesterday, which were neutralized by our defense system, was Turkish in nature.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the drones were Turkish, and the little distinction here, Maria, is that while the Turkish, drones and technology have been battle tested in Azerbaijan and then in Ukraine, the Chinese weapons have not really been battle tested. This is the first time. So the Chinese are going to be learning their lessons very quickly. That's the first point. And the second point is, what about military satellites? Chinese have been helping the Pakistanis with a very precise mapping of the entire territory. Okay. We have to, that's what I'm saying. So the most constructive part of this discussion is that what do we need to do? We need to get our national security grid in order. We need to look at our vulnerabilities. And as far as Pakistan is a kind of a pariah state anyway. But the thing is that our key takeaway is going to take us longer in this larger battle against Pakistan. On the one hand, terrorism is only one part, but this is also Pakistan that is backed by China. And then we have a Bangladesh. So I think the larger strategic picture certainly needs to be kept in mind. And as for other things, I would rather wait for 12th of May and see what developments are made. But yes, the fact that military activity on land, air, and sea have been stopped from both sides, at least until the next talks happen, they are a welcome step. We surely, we have taught Pakistanis a lesson that they would not forget easily.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Swasti Rao, Ambassador Dogra, Elizabeth, and Lieutenant General Rajendra Singh. We are slipping into a short break. We have two newsmakers also lined up for you. A quick break and then we return. It's only operational in nature, which essentially means that the guns have been put down between the two nations. And as far as other areas are concerned, the sanctions against Pakistan, which is on trade front, on water front with regards to the Indus Water Treaty having been put on hold, will continue, is the big message that is coming in from this ceasefire which has been achieved, which is operational since 5 p.m. this evening. Of course, it was the Pakistani DGMO who sought that meeting with India, which was essentially a telephonic conversation initiated by them. Nazir Masoodi is joining us from Srinagar. Nazir, as a journalist who has covered conflicts for years, what's your sense of the moment?
Well, ceasefire which is welcomed by one and all, and everybody was waiting for that. It is in nobody's interest to continue this conflict because there are no clear winners in any war. And it has to end one day. Thank goodness it has ended sooner than later, and people have heaved a sigh of relief. But what it means politically, besides agreeing on ceasefire, which was announced by US President Donald Trump, and then there were two other statements by the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and then the Secretary of the State, where if there's an important thing, besides ceasefire, they have agreed to start talks on a broad set of issues at a neutral place. There would be different interpretation in Pakistan and India, that's obvious. But the fact is, when we talk about broad set of issues with regard to India and Pakistan, there are no prizes to guess what they are. So clearly, politics has started on this and will start. But till the time it was war against Pakistan or the warlike situation, fighting terror, entire country was united, backing the government. But we have already started seeing political opposition parties raising a red flag and questioning the government. That will start now, but that is like part of any democracy which is happening. But the important thing is that number one, that terrorists who are behind the killing of 26 people in Pahalgam, they are still at large. They have not been neutralized or tracked down so far. Number two, has India achieved the objectives it wanted to achieve after carrying out strikes inside Pakistan, or what followed later? There would be lots of discussions, talks, debates on this, what has been achieved, or the objectives which have been achieved, or were there any end game that was factored in before initiating this confrontation or attacking Pakistan. All these things would be factored in. People will talk about it. But for now, the big relief for the people that this war-like situation has ended, like effectively a war. Bombs will not fall in Srinagar, and people we can live sleep this night without fear of, being attacked from Pakistan.
All right, so that's the good part of it, that citizens who have been facing the brunt, the civilians who have been facing the brunt can go home and have a peaceful sleep. Nazir, you can do the same. You have been reporting relentlessly for the last 2 weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. And joining us on the special broadcast is Dr. Harshvardhan Shringla, former Foreign Secretary and former Indian Ambassador to United States. Ambassador Shringla, really appreciate your time. I'm speaking to you at a time when just a few hours ago there has been a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Of course, that announcement came in from the US, and then India went ahead and shared the details as well. There were several countries which were supposed to be playing the role of interlocutors, believed to be, because of the Saudis arriving in India unannounced and then traveling to Islamabad. There was also this sense that Iranians could play the role as well.
No, absolutely. I think this is quite a sudden development. From what I understand, the Pakistan DGMO reached out to our DGMO and offered, a ceasefire. What we have is a stoppage of fire until the 12th of May and until the DGMOs meet. And so it seems to be a sort of a temporary situation for the time being. But clearly, the Pakistanis have been prompted by the Americans, from what I can see, to take the step. Obviously, we have also been in touch. So it seems to be essentially, a combination of many factors.
Yes. Would you also say, Ambassador, that India managed to communicate to the world rather effectively and emphatically that it can carry out an operation of this nature, which was called Operation Sindur, and India managed to say that that when it comes to the second round, we saw the Pakistani military air bases being struck as well. So the message was loud and clear that how far can India go? India can go deep inside the mainland of Pakistan.
No, absolutely. I think Op Sindur was a huge success from the point of view of a pinpointed strike against terrorists and terrorist infrastructure, both in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It not only, in many senses, was, avenged the memory of those of our citizens who were killed, in a cold-blooded manner in Pahalgam. But also served as a very stern warning and deterrence to Pakistan against using terrorism as an instrument of policy. So it was, I would say, a very successful exercise. After that, Pakistan escalated the situation by using kinetic actions to target military and civilian establishments across the border from the north to the west. And continue to do that on 2 subsequent nights. I think we obviously met any such Pakistani action with very, very firm resolve and counter actions. And I think the result of all of that is that Pakistan fully realized that as their air defense and other systems get degraded, as their ability to maintain the supplies that would be needed for a conflict of this nature would dry up, they did, I think, feel the need to work out a sort of a cessation of conflict. And so you see this in the form of this stoppage of fire on both sides.
So you're calling it very carefully a stoppage of fire on both the sides here, Ambassador. And would you also not say that, Operation Sindur was more than just a military response? It was a strategic resolve, a defining moment for what was India's modern security doctrine. Prime Minister Modi's political will and his leadership has to be spoken about in terms of what he did in trying to send that message that India has managed to send a message that it is about a swift, surgical and unapologetically assertive security doctrine now.
Absolutely. It means that there is a policy of Prime Minister Modi that every time you hit us, we'll hit you harder. So it happened in 2016, it happened in 2019, and it has happened this year. And God forbid, that any future actions are there. I think the gloves would be off. But what is important is to keep that pressure on Pakistan, keep it through the various diplomatic and economic means at our disposal, including the Indus Water Treaty provisions and many other means that we have. At the same time, I think we have to be very vigilant that Pakistan does not resort to cross-border terrorism again, and we have to have all the various measures in place, preemptive measures to ensure that they are kept in check in that regard.
A word on the role of the US. While there was a lot of anticipation as to what the Saudis could do, but the call that was made by Marco Rubio to General Asim Munir, was a message that that US understands who's really in charge and control of Pakistan.
Well, it's difficult to say because all the facts are not at our disposal, but everybody has done their bit to contribute in some ways to a better, understanding of our position and to bring Pakistan around to understanding that there is no option for them but to climb down, from their position of escalating the conflict. But I think the final, of course, role was that of the United States, which is the preeminent power in the world even today. And they can bring the sort of pressures that are necessary to bear on a very recalcitrant I would say a state which is sometimes even outside the bounds of normal nationhood to bring them in line.
How do you look at the role of IMF, which certainly, the sanctions in terms of what Pakistan managed to achieve through the IMF meeting yesterday? India abstained from the vote because the rules do not really permit a formal no, but India did convey its strong dissent that in terms of Pakistan military's role in the country's economic dominance and how to expect any kind of transparency in the functioning of Pakistan may be expecting too much out of it.
Well, this is not the sanctioning of a loan or a facility. I think this is a tranche of an existing facility that was agreed to. So there is a 7 billion extended facility fund, out of which $1 billion was provided. And there is another, I think it's called a sustainability fund for which another 1.3 billion was provided out of that existing fund that was already approved for Pakistan. I think there was not enough time for us to be able to lobby with the members to get a decision that was favorable. But I think we have made our point that Pakistan is can't be relied on with the proper use of its funds, and that there is a grave danger that the funds will be misused to support non-state actors, terrorists, and of course their military misadventures. I think if it comes up again, we should be able to make our point even more forcefully.
Okay, before I let you go, your final thought on what is appearing to be just a ceasefire at the moment. If there is an aggression from Pakistan, India will see that as an act of war.
Well, I would say that we haven't seen the end of this because, it is a stoppage of firing. But I think it all depends on Pakistan's, ability to keep its terrorists under check and not to indulge in any more, cross-border attempts at terrorism. And of course, as I said, I mean, the larger issue of dealing with Pakistan is still somewhere out there. We may not be involved in kinetic actions, but I think we will have to deal with the issue that is very much in our immediate neighborhood, which is how to deal with a country that's almost a failed state and one that is going to be a troublesome immediate neighbor.
Ambassador Shringla, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And joining us now on this broadcast is Dr. Mukesh Aghi, President and CEO of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Dr. Aghi, really appreciate your time. As someone who understands the domain of international institutions and trade, how do you look at the ceasefire that has now been confirmed? And of course, which is now in place since 5 p.m. today?
Well, you have to look at both from the perspective of Pakistan and India. For Pakistan, this is not a sustainable war. Its economy is in a mess, almost bankruptcy. IMF just gave them $1 billion+ as a loan to sustain itself. So it could not go beyond 1 week of high escalation with India itself. From India's perspective, you have to look at it has a robust economy which has crossed over $4 trillion in GDP. But more important is, as you see the recalibration of trades taking place, one thing it is important to understand that while the stress point between India and China, between US and China stays on and the tariff stays on up to 100%, India and the US will strike a trade deal and most probably around 10% reciprocal tariff between the two countries. So what happens is it drives US companies to look at India as a next manufacturing site. So it is important that there is a sense of peace in the region. It serves India's interest in the long term. But at the same time, India has made it very clear to Pakistan that the cross-border terrorism is not tolerable anymore. And this is not just India. After October 7th, Israel made it very clear. The rest of the world made it very clear. So I think overall, it is a plus point for India. India comes out ahead as far as the regional conflict goes.
And would you agree that India has managed to communicate rather effectively and forcefully to the world that that it remains firm and its stand is uncompromising against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations? And Prime Minister Modi in particular has been speaking about anti-terror operations, and he has actually walked the talk through Operation Sindur.
Absolutely. I think there is a level of tolerance which a nation can take. And I think India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has been able to take that. But I think he came out with a resolve. That is, we will basically destroy the terrorist camps in Pakistan. And the armed forces of India were quite effective in their endeavor to destroy those camps itself. But the message has gone out that I think if you want to punch back, India will punch back much, much harder. It sends a message that you cannot leverage non-state actors anymore to drive your foreign policy. So hopefully, I believe that Pakistan got the message. I think the message is very clear in Washington, D.C. also. D.C. realized that India has a resolve and it has to step in and convey to Pakistan it makes more sense to have a ceasefire than continue with the belligerent action against India.
Do you think the sanctioning of the loan, the announcement of which came in 24 hours ago, has questioned the effectiveness of institutions such as IMF, the International Monetary Fund, if they are actually funding terrorism in a way, because they are not really holding Pakistan accountable for all the money which is being given by institutions like IMF?
No, absolutely. You have to understand that this is a tranche of $7 billion loan which was sanctioned for Pakistan to have certain conditions on its deficit and on its exports and on its economic agenda itself. And I would not spend too much time or energy on $1 billion going to Pakistan, because as very, very small sum, it has not much of an impact. Yes, the messaging is very important. And I think India should basically endeavor to get back Pakistan on the gray list here. That will have a much, much stronger impact. And I think India did a very effective and efficient job communicating to the global community as to why it has taken the stance of fighting back terror. And I think that energy should be put into trying to put back Pakistan back on the gray list.
Would you say then that when India carried out Operation Sindur 4 days ago, and it did tell the world that it's a victim of terror, Pakistan continues to be the aggressor here, and then it can actually fight back and protect its citizens?
I have to give credit to the Ministry of External Affairs. They basically went down with a very clear messaging to the global community, starting with the big fives down to the European Union and rest of the world. And the message was very clear. We are the victim, and we have been basically targeted on a religious basis. As Hindus, men were killed in front of their spouses and families itself. And this has to stop. And the world community came out supporting India's position. And more important, you have to understand is that when India retaliated, there was no objections from any of the countries. Yes, there were statements made that, hey, we need to get into some kind of a conversation. But at the same time, the world understood and empathized with India that it cannot continue to take in all these blows coming from cross-border terrorism to its citizens. So I think the Ministry of External Affairs and its team were very efficient, very effective in their messaging, and the message was conveyed. In fact, if you look at from President Trump down to France's president, down to any other country, they came out supporting India's position to fight terror. And I think you have to understand very clearly, the cross-border terrorism does not work anymore. We saw that after October 7th. How the Israelis went after the Hezbollahs, the Houthis, and Hamas itself. And I think India has to take the same position. So I would say the effectiveness of messaging by the Ministry of External Affairs to the rest of the world was very, very successful.
Dr. Agi, and this is with regards to what Government of India sources are telling us, that this is a conditional ceasefire only on kinetic action, but as far as the trade, diplomatic and water sanctions are concerned, that is going to continue. How do you look at that development?
Which is true. I think basically, if you look at the overall strategy of India is basically to punish Pakistan. And yes, you do have immediate impact of destroying the terror camps. But in the long term, India has to very seriously look at the water diversion going into Pakistan. Because unless there is some kind of a effective threat, which is economic, which has an impact on Pakistan, this process of the Pakistan army waging terror war in India will continue. So I think India has to seriously look at diverting the water. India has to seriously look at basically containing the trade, unless you have some change in behavior and posturing from the Pakistan side. Otherwise, I think what we'll see is continuous effort by the army to legitimize itself by invoking terror campaign on India. So I think we support, from that perspective, both economic and other aspect of punitive action by India to contain this terror.
All right, Dr. Mukesh Agi, really appreciate your time here on NDTV. That's all from me. Vishnu Shom joins you next to carry forward the news and updates.